My name is Elisa. In the world of luxury events, I am not just a planner. I am a maestro. My clients don't hire me to pick out flowers and canapes. They hire me to create symphonies. I harmonize light, sound, taste, and emotion to craft flawless experiences. My superpower is anticipation. I know the power generator will fail before it even sputters. I know the groom's aunt is allergic to lilies before the first flower enters the hall. My job is to conduct an orchestra of invisible details so that, in the end, the only thing the guests feel is perfection. My reputation preceded me, which is why Veronica sought me out. She was the epitome of new money, abundant cash, absent taste, and an arrogance the size of her walk-in closet. She wanted to organize the Children of Tomorrow Foundation's gala, the most important charity event of the year, not out of altruism, but because chairing the gala was the ultimate passport into the high society she so desperately craved. From the beginning, the collaboration was a tug-of-war. I'd suggest soft, elegant, ambient lighting. She wanted nightclub-style spotlights. I'd propose a sophisticated menu from a Michelin-starred chef. She insisted on gourmet mini burgers and cocktails with edible glitter. To every suggestion of mine, based on 20 years of experience, she'd reply with, "I know what my crowd likes, sweetie." She didn't want a maestro. She wanted an executor for her tacky ideas. The breaking point came during the menu finalization meeting. The chef, a personal friend and one of the country's best, was gently trying to explain why serving caviar with barbecue sauce was a culinary heresy. Veronica waved him off and turned to me. "Elisa, I'm paying a fortune for you and your elite team. Your job is to say yes, Mrs. Veronica. If I wanted opinions, I'd talk to my decorator." With the calm that only years of dealing with fragile egos can provide, I replied, "Veronica, my job is to ensure your event is a memorable success, not a talked-about disaster. Success lies in the details you refuse to hear." That was the last straw for her. She stood up, her face red with fury. "You know what I think? I think anyone with a clipboard and a phone can do your job, and for half the price." She grabbed the contract from the table. "Consider our services terminated. I'll pay 50% of your fee. It's more than enough for the work you've done so far." Being let go was a professional hazard, but being humiliated, having my professionalism reduced to a clipboard, that was a declaration of war. I stood up, took my purse, and said, "Only as you wish, Veronica. The event is in your hands." She smiled, victorious. Little did she know, her hands were the worst possible place that event could be. The humiliation echoed for 2 days, not because of the dismissal, but because of that phrase. Anyone with a clipboard. Veronica hadn't just fired me, she had insulted my art, my expertise, the network I had spent 2 decades building. In her world of appearances, she couldn't understand that the value wasn't in the clipboard, but in the mind that held it. Direct revenge was out of question. Bad-mouthing her to other clients, amateurish. Trying to sabotage the event, criminal and beneath me. My reputation was my greatest asset, and I wouldn't tarnish it with an obvious vendetta. The revenge had to be like my events. Elegant, subtle, and executed with surgical precision. And that's when the idea struck me, clear as a cut crystal. My weapon wouldn't be sabotage. It would be the opposite. It would be obedience, malicious compliance. Veronica would take over the event, feeling like the most competent person in the world. She would contact my suppliers because she knew they were the best, and that was precisely where my power lay. Those suppliers weren't just names in an address book. They were partners, friends, professionals who trusted my judgment and with whom I had a relationship of mutual respect. Their loyalty was to me, not to the client's check. I started making the calls. First to Patrick. "Patrick, darling, I have an unusual request. Mrs. Veronica will be calling you. She's taken over the event. I want you to follow her instructions, to the letter. If she asks for well-done lobster, you deliver a lobster that resembles a rubber tire. No suggestions, no improvements. Just obey. Trust me?" His laughter on the other end of the line was my confirmation. Next, I called Cecilia, my florist. An artist. Cecilia, Veronica's going to send you some Pantone codes she ripped from a magazine. Don't use your good sense to harmonize the tones. Use the exact codes she sends, even if the result is a disaster. I want a written contract with every specification for your protection. I called the sommelier, the lighting designer, the head of security. The message was the same. Give Veronica exactly what she asks for. Not what she wants, but what she asks for. Remove the layer of expertise, the proactivity, the genius you always deliver. Be competent, literal robots. The secret weapon wasn't chaos. It was order, the exact order of an arrogant amateur. Veronica's party was going to be a disaster, and it would be entirely her own fault. She thought competence was about following orders. I was going to show her it's about knowing which orders to give. If you've ever felt your expertise was undervalued, subscribe to the channel. You're going to love what happens when ignorance gets exactly what it asked for. In the following weeks, my phone became a hub of unintentional comedy. My suppliers, now my accomplices, kept me updated on the preparations for the perfectly orchestrated disaster. Veronica, drunk on her newfound power, was issuing orders left and right, convinced she was creating an iconic event. The first gem came from Cecilia, the florist. Elisa, you won't believe this. She emailed me the reference for the shade of pink. It's Pantone 217C. I warned her it's an almost neon hot pink. She replied in all caps, "That's the one I saw in a magazine." I already have her approval in writing. I could just imagine the elegant arrangements looking like decorations from an 80s prom. Then it was Chef Patrick. He called me laughing. She sent me the finalized menu. The main course is filet mignon medallion with raspberry sauce and wasabi mashed potatoes. And she specified the meat must be well done so there's no danger. Elisa, I wept on the inside, but I replied, "Received and confirmed, Mrs. Veronica." He was having fun executing the order with the precision of an executioner. The panic, however, was not yet Veronica's. On the contrary, she was ecstatic. Without my interference and pessimism, everything was running perfectly. The suppliers promptly answered her emails, confirming every detail without question. She couldn't tell the difference between genuine cooperation and malicious compliance. To her, the absence of debate was a sign of her genius and leadership. My only job during this phase was to ensure that each of my partners was legally protected. I want a copy of every email, every text, every signed napkin. I instructed. Every bizarre specification needs to be documented and approved by her. We were building a fortress of evidence, not for a court of law, but for the inevitable court of public opinion. The preparation for Veronica's event was running without a single problem. No unforeseen issues, no creative solutions. And it was precisely this absence of brilliance, this literal and soulless execution, that would be her undoing. She was conducting her own symphony of disaster, and each of us was just playing the score she herself had written. The calm before the storm had never been louder to me. The day of the gala arrived, and with it the first notes of the symphony of disaster. I was invited, of course. Veronica made a point of sending me the invitation, a gesture to rub her success in my face. I couldn't wait. I arrived at the ballroom, and the first sight almost made me laugh out loud. The neon hot pink from Cecilia's flowers was an assault on the eyes. Paired with the gold tablecloths Veronica had chosen, the room didn't look like a charity ball, but a second-rate Las Vegas casino. Some guests were already whispering, looking at the decor with confused expressions. I found Veronica near the entrance. She was wearing a dress that was far too shiny, with a tense smile. "Elisa, darling, what do you think? A luxury, don't you think? Much more modern than your ideas." I replied, "It's vibrant, Veronica." with as much sincerity as I could muster. Her panic began to set in when the head of lighting made the final adjustments. Instead of the warm, diffused light that enhances a room, he followed Veronica's order to use direct spotlights on each table, like at a concert. The result was that the guests had harsh shadows on their faces, and the hall was filled with dark spots and blindingly lit areas. I saw Veronica call the technician over, who calmly showed her the lighting diagram she had approved. "But it wasn't supposed to look like this," she hissed. "We did it exactly as you drew it," he replied, with deadly politeness. Her tension mounted when the orchestra began to play. The music selection, also her own, bizarrely alternated between Viennese waltzes and classic rock, creating a completely schizophrenic atmosphere. The guests didn't know whether to talk, dance, or just stand still. But the real chaos settled into Veronica's soul when she started noticing the looks, the forced smiles, the whispers behind fans. She was getting exactly what she asked for, but it wasn't what she had imagined. She didn't have the language or the knowledge to understand why it was all wrong. She just felt it. Sweat began to bead on her forehead. The queen of the party was slowly realizing that her house of cards was about to collapse, and there wasn't a single person she could blame. Sometimes the best revenge is giving someone exactly what they deserve. If you can't wait to see this party fall apart, subscribe to the channel because the main humiliation is about to be served. Dinner was the main stage for the disaster. The service began, and the main course arrived at the tables. The famous well-done filet mignon medallion with raspberry sauce and wasabi mashed potatoes. The meat, as requested, was gray and tough as shoe leather. The sweet sauce and the spicy puree created a war in the mouth. Next to me, a famous food critic, whom I knew would be there, stared at the plate with a look of pure horror before scribbling a note in his little book. Veronica, from her head table, watched the plates returning to the kitchen almost untouched. She stood up and marched over to Chef Patrick, who was supervising the service. The discussion was quiet, but I could read the fury on her face. Patrick, with the calm of a monk, simply showed her the email with the menu order, printed and laminated. She returned to her table, defeated. The climax of the humiliation, however, came during the speech by the event's main sponsor, the businessman Octavio Montero, a man known for his philanthropy and impeccable taste. He took the stage, thanked everyone for coming, and then paused, looking around the hall. "I would like to congratulate Mrs. Veronica on her courage," he began, and the choice of word made everyone fall silent. It takes a lot of courage to make such bold choices. A decor that challenges conventions, a gastronomic experience that will certainly be remembered for a long time. The sarcasm was so fine and sharp it could cut the air. In fact, it was such a unique event that for next year, the foundation has asked me to take the lead and ensure that we return to a, let's say, more traditional format. And for that, I will make a point of bringing back the only professional who knows how to turn charity into magic, Mrs. Elisa. He looked directly at me and smiled. The entire room turned to look at me, and then they all turned to Veronica. Her face was no longer red with anger. It was white, ghostly white. She was publicly praised for her courage and, in the same breath, fired from next year's event and exposed as an incompetent. All this while I, the anyone with a clipboard, was being crowned the savior. The symphony of disaster had reached its grand finale, and it was the sweetest music I had ever heard.
The party was over before midnight. The guests fled as if escaping a fire, leaving behind a hall of hot pink desolation and half-eaten plates. The night that was supposed to consecrate Veronica as the new lady of high society became her public execution. The consequences in the following days were swift and brutal. The event raised less than half of what was expected, a resounding failure for the foundation. The food critic published a review titled "The Ball of Bad Taste," in which he didn't criticize Chef Patrick, but rather the invisible and disastrous hand that forced him to commit culinary crimes.
The society columns were even crueler. Reports of Octavio Montero's speech spread, and Veronica became a joke in the circles she so desperately wanted to impress. She was no longer seen as a rising socialite, but as a caricature of bad taste, an example of what money can't buy. The doors she wanted to open slammed shut in her face with an audible click. Meanwhile, my suppliers emerged unscathed. They were all paid in full, protected by their detailed contracts. Their loyalty to me became a legend in our industry. Other event planners tried to hire them, but they remained faithful, further strengthening my network and my market value. Veronica's attempt to prove I was replaceable only proved how indispensable my network of trust truly was. Veronica, I heard, tried to blame everyone, the chef, the florist, the orchestra, but each of them, with polished calm, presented the emails and signed approvals. The evidence was irrefutable. The architect of the disaster was her, and her alone. Her arrogance left her completely isolated, with no one to blame but her own reflection in the mirror. The revenge was complete, not with a shout, but with the deafening echo of her failure. While Veronica retreated to lick her wounds, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old clients, new clients, people who read the society columns and understood the message between the lines. Elisa doesn't just organize parties, she guarantees success and protects against disaster. My business didn't double, it tripled. The contract with Octavio Montero for the following year's gala was the biggest of my career, with an unprecedented clause for total creative autonomy. He wasn't just hiring my services, he was investing in my vision. My new beginning was the understanding of my true worth. It wasn't just in my organizing skills, but in the trust I inspired. The trust of my team, my suppliers, and now my clients. The humiliation I suffered served as the greatest marketing I could have ever had. Months later, I ran into Veronica at a restaurant. She was alone, at a table in the corner. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, as if she had seen a ghost. There was no more arrogance, just the shadow of a deep shame. I felt no pity, no joy. I just felt the silence of completion. My revenge wasn't about destroying Veronica. It was about building myself up on an even more solid foundation. She accused me of being just a woman with a clipboard, and in the end, she was right. But what she never understood is that in the right hands, a simple clipboard can be a maestro's scepter or the baton that conducts the most perfect and deserved symphony of someone's ruin. And I am, after all, a maestro. Elisa's story proves that true value lies in expertise, not appearance. If this journey of elegant and satisfying revenge inspired you, subscribe to Revenge of Victoria and share. We love to see how far our stories travel, so tell us in the comments what city, state, or country you're watching from. Until next time.